fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren.
Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
We are at the interview part of the show, and today we have a special guest that has written a book that caught my fancy, and the book is called Murder and Mayhem, and it's an annotated bibliography of gay and queer males in America, or in mystery, 1908 to 2018, and the author is Matt Lubbers-Moore. Thank you for taking the time.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's first of all, it's the first time you've been on the show, so let's talk about who you are and how you got into this writing of a book like this. So what's kind of your history here?
Well, I've always been kind of a huge fan of mysteries. Going back to Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and Boxcar Children. And as I got older, the books really didn't appeal to me much. As a gay man, I didn't relate to the characters as much as I, did as I was younger. So I started to I started finding books that actually had gay detectives and gay characters and mysteries, and those books started to appeal to me a lot more. And so as I really delved into reading them and then, of course, collecting them, I started to create a database of them. And I'm also a co-moderator of a Facebook group that's all about gay mysteries and suspenses and horrors, thrillers. And we were interviewing another bibliographer who is much more esteemed than I am, who passed away not too long ago, Drew Wayne Gunn. And he had mentioned that, with today's technology, it'd be so easy to create a database, that's open to anyone, that's available to everyone. And so I thought, well, I already kind of started a database, so I might as well just start finishing I might as well keep working on the database. So that's how I got started on the bibliography.
Wow, that's so you must have an interest in a lot of history and stuff. So what made you? That's not the right way. Where you began, in what year of going back and putting together these stories? So and how did you determine where you were going to go back to?
Well, I started really doing it in 2014, compiling the databases after the interview with Drew Wayne Gunn. And so what I did was I used his bibliography. I used another couple of bibliographies that I found about gay detectives. And I went back as far as I could go, and 1909 was the earliest I could find a gay character in a mystery, and it was by Arthur Conan Doyle, who of course wrote Sherlock Holmes. The short story is not one of the Sherlock Holmes stories, although a London detective is mentioned, but is not named. But it's the short story, and of course the short story, was published in 1909. It's called The Man with the Watches, and the great thing is that it's there's no copyright on it any longer because it's so old. So I was actually able to include it in the bibliography at the very end.
So, what are you hoping for when you take on a book like this? This is a lot of work and big project. What are you hoping people get out of it?
So hopefully I sell one copy. That's all I really hope.
There's ambition for you.
Completely justified if I sell just one copy. I've actually sold quite a few copies, so I feel very justified in writing it. But I mean, the main thing for the book is, so many resources can use it. It's not just, it's a collection of titles and authors and things, and if someone like me who's a collector, I can use it to finish my collection, to really get it even more in depth, or I include a rating in the book, 1 through 3, for how involved a gay character is in the book, and if it's a 3 out of 3, the detective is gay. If it's a 2, the main character is not gay, but their best friend is, who helps them solve the mystery, or is very involved in the crime. And a 1 out of 3 just means that there was a gay person somewhere in the book, either positively or negatively. And so what some people can do, if you're a collector like me, you can say, well, I only want to collect books in which the detective is gay. And so you only collect the books that are 3 out of 3s. Or you go, well, or you're like me, and you go, I need to collect everything, and so you have to buy every single book in that I list. But other than collectors, libraries can use it because, if they want to fill in their collections, or if they have members of their student body or faculty that would like it, they're able to be able to use it. I know there's a couple bookstores that have bought the book to help them with their listing of books. They're more upscale, rare, antiquarian bookstores, and it helps them with their listings and things. But I mean, it's real. And even for I was talking to someone on Facebook, and they bought it because they love books and they like gay characters, and they thought, well, I'll just be able to read through it and see if there's any books that I want to buy out of it. So it really is available to anyone that wants to know more about kind of the gay people and detective stories. But the other cool thing about writing this book, and I didn't even think about it until I was kind of in the middle of it, was that it's from 1909 to 2018, and you can kind of almost see the history of the acceptance of gay people in the world through the detective story. Unfortunately, Arthur Conan Doyle, his short story was actually very positive. The gay men in the short story are criminals, but he represents the love that they have for each other as a very positive and welcoming and open thing, which I was not expecting. I was kind of expecting it was going to be horrible, and he was going to trash them and really depict homosexuals as deviants and perverts. But you can kind of almost see, Agatha Christie's in the book, and she, and the gay characters she uses, they're the quiet neighbor down the street, or some other authors might use a gay character who lives upstairs. They're the quiet, studious, they own an antique store, or they're a barber, or, there's some sort of gay cliche. But slowly, as you get into the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, all of a sudden there's gay detectives and they're the main characters and they're not a stereotype and they're positive, and that slowly moves into the 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s where gay characters are everywhere and they are in every profession and they aren't just relegated to just one archetype in the detective world. So I like it because you can also not only read it to see what books you might like, but you can also read it as a history story of the acceptance of gay people in America.
Matt, I think this is amazing. I think it's so difficult for any person, regardless of your sexuality, your preferences. It makes no difference. It's already hard enough in today's day and age to go out there and find something that you are absolutely affiliated to on the shelf, because we live in this virtual, this electronic world. So to walk in and find something that you really enjoy reading is difficult enough.
Yeah.
Let alone when you can't actually relate to the characters. And I see that not only in sexual preference or gender identity, but also with disability, for example. If you can't relate to the people that are in the book in the same way, then the book becomes meaningless. So, a brilliant way of bringing everything together and adding that review to it and helping people to make their own informed decisions about what they might be more interested in terms of reading. Have you, in terms of, just the sheer volume of text out there to research and put into your book must have been incredible. How did you filter it down and decide what you wanted to put in your book?
That was very, very difficult because there's so much. And, when I was using the bibliography from Drury Wayne Gunn, he only used books that had gay detectives. And they had to be public, they had to be in print, they had to be available for purchase and things like that. I had a really hard time because I didn't want to exclude anything. So the most obscure thing, there's a couple books in here that I put, at the end of each blurb, I put, sometimes I'll add something about the book on my own, and I'll say, this book is no longer available. I can't find it anywhere. It was an ebook. It's no longer available. And the thing about that is, authors can bring things out. They can take things away. With the electronic world as it is, with ebooks, they're here one day and gone the next, or they can be heavily edited easily. And so a lot of authors, I was talking to Otto Penzler, who runs Mysterious Books Shop in New York, who has written a ton of bibliographies as well about different things, and he's not doing bibliographies anymore because he's like, there's so many ebooks out there that aren't being put out in print, so how do you account for them? So I kind of have my own system of doing it. I put them in there and I make sure I state that they are an ebook only, so that people, if they're looking for it, they may not be able to find it, because it might not be available anymore. Or the blurb that I include in the book might have changed drastically by the time they actually get the book. But I didn't want to exclude anything. So I included as many ebooks as I could find. I included as many weird, off-the-cuff things that I had a hard time categorizing. It kind of was a mystery, but I'm not 100% sure it was a mystery. But I don't want to exclude it because there might be someone out there that does want to find that book. And so it was very difficult in that. The other hard part is there is so many mystery novels out there. I mean, books are being published millions of books are being being published, all the time. And so it's really difficult to read them all. So I have a great support team. There's a librarian down in Australia, Graham Cheater, who was an incredible help to me. There's a guy in Finland named Pekka. He found hundreds of books for me, just expedited the time I could actually publish this by probably years, because he just delved into Twitter and into publishers' websites and just found tons of authors. Now, the thing was, the minute I published it, of course, then I found hundreds more. Louise Penny is not in the book, and yet in every single one of her books, there's a gay couple. So I completely missed her. So, I'm having to go back through and re-edit and come up with, a new edition that'll probably come out in 4 to 5 years. So yeah, I didn't want to exclude anything. That's why I also did gay and queer males, because I didn't want to leave out like transgender. I didn't want to leave out bisexual men. Because we're already such a fragmented world. I didn't want to exclude even more.
No, absolutely. And how do you, so going forward, just thinking this through, now we're able to identify with many different forms of gender identity. So over 100 different gender identities out there. So how do you propose to do that going forward? Is that something you've considered? Does it overcomplicate something that doesn't need to be overcomplicated?
What I figure is going forward is that however the author describes the character is how I'll describe the character in the book.
Yeah. Because it is, we're just developing all the time, aren't we? And we're becoming more understanding and accepting of how we feel as an individual, and individualizing everything, which is brilliant, and is absolutely how it should be. Mm-hmm. But to bring that into your bibliography would be a real challenge. So it's good to hear that you've got this sort of kind of already thinking about what your second edition might look like. Yeah, so just can I ask you something a little bit personal, Matt, if you don't mind? It's not too personal, actually, but it's just you referenced earlier, you were talking about how you suddenly realised that you weren't relating to characters in books the same way as you used to as a child. So what sort of age did you really start to understand your own sexuality and think, that's not where I want to be. I don't want to be brought up and enveloped with this one stereotype of who I should be, and actually that's not who I am.
Well, I was very fortunate as a young man. My parents were, I can't say liberal. I mean, but they were more free thinking and more open. So I came to realize that I was different from my peers about 9 years old. I came out to myself, as gay when I was 12. I came out to friends when I was I came out to friends and family about 16. And then I had a brief homophobic friend reaction when I was 17-ish. Which pushed me slightly back into the closet, and so I dated a woman who ended up becoming a really good friend. But on my 19th birthday, I fully embraced my being gay, and I have not looked back since. But I was very fortunate that when I came out to my parents, my mom said, it doesn't matter, I love you no matter what. When my dad found out, which was pretty much the same night, but then, he talked to me later about it, he said the same thing. So I was very fortunate as a young man, and I know not a lot of people have the kind of, experiences that I did.
It's horrifying, isn't it? The stories that you hear about young people who are so scared of losing something. A friend of mine's son came out to me, and I said, "Well, why are you talking to me about this?" And he said, "I'm really worried." He said that my parents may not respond in the way that I want them to. And I said, I've known your parents a very long time, and they already know. and he smiled and he laughed, and then he obviously went and had the conversation, and I kind of pre-warned them. I said, there's a conversation coming your way that you already know about. Yes. And I said, he just needs your love right now. And they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant, as I knew they would be. But that innate fear as a teen, when you're already going through so many hormonal changes, and you've kind of battled with all of those feelings and come through it and made your decisions, and then for somebody to reject you for that is just, it's unthinkable, and yet it happens so often.
Yes, unfortunately, it happens too often.
Absolutely. And I work with young people, and I see that a lot, and it's incredibly sad. And my own son actually identifies transgender, and I will share this with everybody on the radio. I'm sure he won't mind. It was very funny. And he said we were in a van, and we'd been travelling for some time and delivering furniture actually. And he said, "Oh, I've got something to say." And I said, okay. It was about 11 o'clock at night. I was very tired. He said, I've got something to say. I said, okay. And he said, I might be gay. I said, all right, okay. Is there anything else? He said, oh, okay. Is that okay? I said, it really doesn't make any difference to me. He said, oh, I need to say something else. And I said, okay. I might be trans. I said, okay, that's fine. I said, is anything else? He went, no, I think we're done. And it was as simple as that. And I can't imagine how that would have felt to him had I had said or reacted in any other way. Total, for me, he is who he is. Mm-hmm. And when he wants to be who she is, then he will make that decision and that change. And I think it's fantastic that he has the opportunity to do that. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for when people are really struggling and they're trying to understand how to relate to people, to know where to go to read something that is not educational particularly, but it helps them to identify with different people and how people feel about things and how people respond to situations. It's got to be a good thing from an education point of view in terms of sexuality, as well as the historical, evolution of human rights. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I completely agree. Yes.
I think it's so your book too, you're thinking of doing in a few years' time when you've got obviously further texts to put in that, so from 2018 to 2023 kind of range. Mm-hmm. Where are you now in that?
Well, unfortunately, in March I had acute pancreatitis. So I have been pretty much bedridden for the last 2 months. So right now I have an incredibly amount of time on my hands because all of my jobs, I work at a library, I work at a bookstore, I work at a comic book store. All three of them are closed by the state of Michigan. And so I have all this time on my hand to work on the book, and that's what I planned on. And then all of a sudden I got pancreatitis and I was bedridden. So sitting for any amounts of time is incredibly painful for me right now. Mm. So unfortunately, I have not gotten as far as I would like to have gotten at this point. I keep getting emails and messages from the people who have been helping me, so at least I have something to fall back on when I start to include them again. And I, like anything I missed, so like the Louise Penny books, she's already, I already have them in the database. So once I get putting the books from the database into the annotated bibliography, I will be that much further ahead. But unfortunately, this year has not been very fruitful as much as I would have liked to it have been.
Sad.
I was going to ask, in this book here, is there a story or two that really had an effect on you that stays with you now to this day that you hadn't been aware of before?
The greatest, in my opinion, book written in the gay mystery genre is it's called Fade Out by Joseph Hansen, and he's kind of seen as I have my, there's always the fathers of this and that. I have my own hierarchy for the gay mysteries genre. I consider him to be the grandfather, the godfather, essentially, of gay mysteries. Without him, who knows how long it would have taken for gay mysteries to really take off. But Fade Out is an incredibly beautiful book. The main character, in today's world, he probably would not be he would be viewed kind of as a toxic masculinity character. He didn't like effeminate gay men. He was very rough and tumble, and he didn't speak much, and he smoked 10 packs a day, and this book was published in 1970. But he just lost his lover, who was actually a very effeminate gay man, who was a interior designer, and the main character is finally up after being bedridden for 6 months because he just couldn't imagine life without his lover. And I think it's like the third or fourth chapter in where he starts kind of thinking about how he met him, and there's this wonder, and it's so beautiful about how they met and how they made their lives together, and it was such a beautiful story, in the middle of a detective story. The main character's name is Dave Brandstetter, and he works for an insurance company as a as a death claims investigator. But without Joseph Hansen, who knows how long it might have taken for authors like Michael Nava and Richard Stevenson or John Morgan Wilson to really come out and shine, or even be published by mainstream publishers. Up to Joseph Hansen, there was no mainstream publishers publishing, gay detectives. You had George Baxt, who published the Feral Love books, but they were seen more as campy and pulp. So when you got to Joseph Hansen, all of a sudden it was okay for mainstream publishers to publish gay authors, publishing about gay main characters who aren't stereotypes and who don't always die, and at the end.
Do you see that as a problem still today with gay stories or books or anything like that being published today with mainstream publishers, or is it more acceptable?
Well, unfortunately, in the 90s, publishers got very afraid. They saw the Defense of Marriage Act, the Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Vermont and Hawaii were trying to push, gay marriage, and the people of their states were very opposed. And so all of a sudden you see these mainstream they're very conservative. They're looking at their pocketbooks, and they don't want anything to affect, their profit margins, heaven forbid. So all of a sudden in the 90s, they saw all of this backlash against gay culture and gay people. And they went, no, we can't publish gay authors anymore. And all of a sudden you had, Richard Stevenson, and all these other authors who really had a successful runs with their books, 10, 15 mysteries with these mainstream publishers, and they did fairly well, who all of a sudden went, yeah, we're not renewing your contract. There's no market for it. Even though there had been a market all this time, and there still would have been if they would have kept publishing. And I think it's been very hard for gay authors to publish with mainstream publishers. But I'm hopeful, but I know a lot of gay authors I talk to are not. You have James Patterson, who published a gay detective. You had Anne Cleves, who just won, I want to say an Edgar, but I think it might have been an Agatha Christie Award for her book, which had a gay detective. So you're starting to see straight authors publish detective stories with gay main characters. So I'm hopeful that eventually mainstream publishers will say, oh, well, these straight authors are having such a success. Let's see how maybe gay authors will do. But, again, with, there's so many small independent publishers. There's self-publishing, which is so easy, on, Amazon, you write something, you can put it out on Amazon. No fuss, no need for editors or anything like that. But you have some great authors out there who are self-publishing their books because they don't have any access to the publishing world. I mean, Marshall Thornton has won 3 Lambda Awards for Best Gay Mysteries. He self-publishes. So you're seeing that a lot more, where, are the mainstream publishers really that necessary for gay authors? But again, you're missing the promotion, you're missing the support of all this. So it can be, there's pros and cons, of getting mainstream publishers to publish your books. Are they really necessary or not and stuff? I'm hoping that eventually mainstream publishers will start to publish gay authors again, but at this point, they're just not.
And it does make a difference, because they get printed and put in bookstores, and they get on a front shelf when someone walks in and they see it. That's kind of the advantage of it.
Yes.
Is this sort of why you are doing requeered tales original publications? So you're kind of starting publishing yourself as well?
Well, we don't do original publications. We only do reprints. We only republish books. What we do is at Requeered Tales is we find authors and titles that we think have historical merit, and we think these books should never have gone out of print in the first place, and they should be brought back out. And it's the same thing with my book about, you can trace the history of, gay characters, and gay people in American life through literature. And, and when you read, like a book by Grant Michaels, who, he was a stereotypical hairstylist who was who, went off and did all this detective work and solved crimes and but he also worked but he was also butch. He I don't recall any fist fights he would get into, but he stood up to killers. He stood up to people and said, this is who I am. And, he was publishing, in the 80s and early 90s. And, that's, for a character like that, to be around is just amazing. But the other thing, Neil Plaxey and I were talking about this, and I think he actually wrote it in one of the introductions to one of his books, was that this was kind of the first character to work with the police department. He was a stereotypical gay man who actually got along and worked with the police department in a time where police departments did not want to work with gay people, especially, in that kind of a closed capacity, or even to assume to let them do their job. But no, so like, the first book that we published was a horror novel called Steam, by J.B. Laws. And, he was an unpublished author. And Allison Press and a bookstore in San Francisco, I can't remember which one, had a competition for the best new author. And so what they would do is, the employees of this bookstore would read all the manuscripts, and whoever had the best manuscript would then be published by Allison Press. And Steam is amazing. I mean, it was being referred to as, J.B. Laws was being referred to as the gay Stephen King. The book, I mean, I can't read horror novels because of my overactive imagination, but of course I had to read it to, make sure that, it was edited and proofread and all that kind of fun stuff. So I read it, and I couldn't even go into my bathroom at night for like 2 weeks because it was so terrifying. And he died, just a couple years after the book came out, and just before his second book came out. And, we lost so many voices to AIDS. So many young people that they really had so much talent and so much promise, and then we lost them. And I'm not just talking about authors, but artists and musicians, and I just think of like how rich our world would really be right now if all those young men had not died. And so for us, it's not just going, ooh, these are really good books and people should still be reading them, but it's also to say, hey, read these books. These voices still deserve to be heard. And, and so many of these authors are just so brilliant, and they are so the books are just so wonderfully written. And we really do want people to reread them because they are, either reread them or read them for the first time, because they really are amazing. And yeah, they're from the 80s and 90s, and they might be a bit dated. There's no cell phones or laptops, and there's a lot of running around, and having to solve crimes, the old-fashioned way, where you actually had to talk to a person in person. But, they're so good, and they deserve to be read. And so at Requeered Tales, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to revive, we're trying to preserve the LGBT literary heritage, because it's just being lost.
So what's next for Matt? Where do you go from here?
I'm not really sure.
that was the conversation killer right there. I don't know.
All right.
Well done, Matt.
I'm gonna keep working, on my Murder and Mayhem, and hopefully come out. It came out a few days before leap year, or it came out in February of leap year, and so I thought, well, it'd be kind of fun to come out every 4 years on leap year. So that means that I have a lot of work ahead of me, and so I'm hoping of getting that. Of doing that and keeping up with it. And then Requeered Tales, we've got so many great authors and so many great books, and people can check them out at requeeredtales.com. I would mention going to our Facebook page, but I'm the one that updates it, and having been sick, I have not been updating it as much as I should have. But no, my two partners, Justine and Alexander, are brilliant. They've been working, really hard. This whole COVID-19 thing's been just, really put us behind. But we've got, a couple big books coming out. John Morgan Wilson, he's the first gay man to write a gay main character as his detective to win an Edgar Award. We've got him coming out, and we're going to be republishing his first book in September. And I know I mentioned that we don't do original titles, but there's a couple authors that published books that were never published. So they wrote books that were never published as part of their series, and we're working on bringing those out as well. So we're working. We've got a lot of balls in the air. We got a lot of stuff going on, and it's really exciting times at Requeer Tales. So Matt, I'm also working on my master's degree in history. I have a master's degree in library sciences, which is probably why I'm obsessed with bibliographies. But no, we've got so much stuff going forward. I've got tons of stuff on my plate, so it's going to be a very busy time, and I'm really looking forward to it.
No, it sounds like it. Lots of balls flying around in the air.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. So what other contact information do you have? So the book can be found in Amazon, anywhere else, or do you have a website for yourself?
I do not have a website for myself. The book can be found anywhere. Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. You can request it from your local bookstores. So it can be found anywhere. And then for myself, if people either for Requeer Tales or for myself, if people want to get a hold of me with ideas, or if they have the book and they found that I didn't include an author or I missed a title or something like that, I would love for people to get a hold of me and say, hey, you missed this title, because then I can include it. And I want to be as inclusive as I can, and I want to include as much as I can. So if people want to email me, they can email me at mattgenemoore at gmail.com. That's MattGeneMoore at gmail.com. Or they can get a hold of me through requeertales.com. There's a contact page on there, or it's requeertales at gmail.com. And so if people also have ideas of authors or titles that shouldn't be out of print, that they would love for us to maybe look into, we've got 2020 and 2021 pretty well booked solid, but we're really, we're starting to fill up 2022, and we would love to hear from people if they have ideas for other titles or authors that are out of print, that they think have literary merit for the gay community, for the LGBT community, that we should look into, because we're always looking for ideas, we're always looking for authors, we're always looking for titles.
Is it a real hard process for you to get the out of print books and then get them reprinted? What kind of a process is that?
Sometimes it's super, super easy, where we just contact the author and say, hey, do you want us to reprint your books? And they say yes. They're literally just send me the contract. We send them the contract, and they sign it, and they send it right back to us. It's fantastic. Other times it's, when the author is deceased, it's tracking down the estate. A really good example is I can either do J.B. Laws or I can do Grant Michaels. I'll do Grant Michaels this time. So with Grant Michaels, we only had a physical address for a lawyer in New Jersey who had the estate. So I wrote her a physical letter asking her to put us in touch with Grant Michael's mother, who we believed had the rights to his books. Well, so I got an email from Grant Michael's brother, who informed me that their mother had passed away shortly after Grant Michael's did, and that he was the estate holder now. So we worked with him for about a month or two over the wording of the contract and getting everything prepared. And then the only thing that we require of estate holders is that they they sign an affidavit saying that they are the estate holders, and that if it turns out that they are not, that we're not liable for damages or for copyright infringement. So he kind of freaked out a little bit when he had to sign this. And so he went back to his lawyer, and it turns out he didn't have the rights to the books. It turns out that Grant Michaels had left the rights to the books to a friend of his. So then the brother ended up putting us in touch with the friend, and so then we went through this whole process again of going over the contract and getting everything, all of the P's and Q's, and crossing the I's and T's, and getting all that stuff done. And when he needed to sign the paperwork saying that, he was the estate holder, he freaked a little bit too, and confessed that he had donated everything to a library in Boston. And so we had to contact the library in Boston and ask them, and they're like, no, we don't have the rights, we just have the papers. So we went back and we were like, oh no, you still have the rights to you still have the rights to the books, they just have the papers. But he wanted them to actually write out we do not have the rights to the paper. He wanted them to sign what we wanted him to sign. So eventually, the library did that. He signed, and so now I think we just came out with the third Grant Michaels Stan Krajcik books, third or fourth. So we're really happy with that. But yeah, sometimes tracking down who has the rights can be bothersome. It can take some time. And then there's some authors that we've reached out to. They don't want their books back in print, and there's nothing we can say or do. I'm from Michigan. We always joke that I'm Michigan nice, and that I can, sweet talk my way, and sometimes the authors just don't, really want to. They don't want their books back in print, and Alexander's in Canada, so we always joke that he's even nicer than Michigan nice. So he goes after authors sometimes, and unfortunately they just don't want their books back in print. They just either aren't happy with how they turned out, or they just felt like it was part of their life that's over now, and they just don't want to deal with it. And I feel, and
That's sad.
Yeah, it makes me kind of sad when I think, but they're so good. And some of these authors that don't want their books back in print, they're Lambda award-winning authors. Some of them have won awards for their books, and they're like, no, we just didn't feel they were any good, or no, we just, that was part of my past, and I don't want it out there. And I'm like, but the literary heritage.
Well,
That is sad.
do you think maybe they had a real bad time during the publishing of it, or when it came out? Maybe it was kind of a bad time for them and backlash on it?
Well, and I was just going to say, and some of these authors did have, homophobic reactions, and, some of them, might not have been out when the books came out. I know, like, Richard Stevenson, his real name is Richard Lipes, I think is how you pronounce his last name. But he was a teacher at at a school, and he had 2 young children and was married when he started publishing his first gay novels. And so he changed his author name to Richard Stevenson because he didn't want, his kids to be picked on, or, because they're the children of that gay author. So, I know a lot of lesbian authors that we've reached out to, they've a lot of them have written under pseudonyms, because they were married at the time, and, they didn't want, their husbands knowing they were publishing lesbian mystery novels. And so, I think at that, so now, of course, now that they're older and, they've, either come out or whatever, they see that as not a great time in their lives. So I don't fault them. I don't say, oh, you need to publish these books anyways. Who cares about your past, but, I completely understand where they're coming from. And
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's been a great conversation, and so we will have your book up on our site, so people listening can just do one click and pick up the book. And I recommend it if you want some really good gay history. This is the book to go to. Our guest has been the author, the one that put it together, and that's Matt Lubbers-Moore. Thank you for taking the time to be on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I had a great time.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.